The grand hall of the Morgan estate, once a symbol of power and luxury, was now a battlefield. The pristine white walls were smeared with streaks of red and blue paint, like furious brushstrokes from a mad artist. Italian leather chairs lay overturned, an antique vase shattered, its glass shards glittering across the marble floor. Pillow feathers floated in the air like torn fragments of memory. In the center of the storm stood 3 7-year-old boys, triplets, Ethan, Caleb, and Noah. Their eyes were red, burning with defiance and despair. Ethan, the eldest, raised a toy car high and slammed it down on the floor. The metallic crash rang sharp, like a silent scream inside him. "We don't need you!" he shouted, his voice hoarse, his small fists clenched tight. Caleb, the mischievous one, hurled a pillow. White feathers burst into the air. Noah, the shyest, clutched a stuffed bear, his eyes glistening with tears, yet he stood behind his brothers like a small soldier. Grace Carter, 32, stepped through the heavy oak doors, her plain gray dress brushing the floor. The butler backed away, whispering, "She won't last a day." But Grace didn't flinch. She knelt down, her gentle gaze meeting each pair of angry eyes. "I know you're mad," she said, her voice low and steady, like a breeze calming fire. "I was mad too, when I lost the person I loved most." Ethan froze, still gripping a ball. "You'll leave," he cried, voice shaking, as if afraid his words might come true. "Just like everyone else." Grace smiled softly, refusing to look away. "I won't promise to make you behave, Ethan. I won't promise to replace your mother. I only promise one thing. I'll stay. Even if you throw this whole house at me." Caleb dropped the pillow, stunned. Noah blinked, a tear sliding down his cheek. Ethan turned away, but his shoulders trembled. The old grandfather clock ticked in the corner, marking every second of this fragile beginning. Grace stood, brushing feathers off her dress. "So," she said playfully, "who wants to show me just how good you are at breaking things?" A faint smile flickered across Caleb's lips. And in that instant, in the chaos of the grand hall, a spark of hope lit up. Small but unyielding. Rain hammered down on New York, drumming against the windows of Morgan Capital's 45th floor office. Alexander Morgan, 38, sat alone, his vacant eyes fixed on a family photo. Emily, his wife, was beaming beside their 3 boys, Ethan, Caleb, Noah. He brushed his fingers against the frame, his voice breaking into a whisper. "Emily, I was wrong to push you onto that flight. 6 months earlier, in the warm kitchen of the Morgan estate, Emily had straightened his tie, teasing, 'Eat a proper breakfast. Don't just live on coffee.'" He laughed, but his eyes were heavy with worry. "Take this flight, close the deal, then the whole family goes to Hawaii. Sound good?" Emily hesitated, shook her head, then finally she gave in with a soft smile. One day only, Alex. It was the last smile he would ever see. Flight 472 crashed minutes after takeoff, taking Emily's life, leaving behind a void that could never be filled. Alexander became a widower, standing before 3 tear-streaked faces. He reached out to hold them, but Ethan, the eldest, turned away, his small hand clenched tight. Caleb and Noah hid behind their brother, their eyes a mix of pain and accusation. So Alexander buried himself in work, stayed at the office until midnight, pretended numbers could numb the wound. But every night, when he returned, the mansion echoed like a tomb, only his footsteps across the cold marble floors. In the bedroom, under the dim light, Ethan whispered to his brothers, "Dad chose a deal over Mom. If he hadn't forced her, she'd still be here." Caleb hugged a pillow, his voice trembling. "Dad doesn't care about us." Noah clutched his teddy bear, tears streaming down. "I just want Mom." Ethan's words carved deep into all 3 of them, turning grief into resentment. They started acting out, breaking things, driving away 17 nannies, as if punishing the whole world, and most of all, their father. Alexander, once a man who ruled Wall Street, was now lost inside his own home. He thought work was his escape, but every look from his sons reminded him he hadn't only lost Emily, he was losing them too. And the rain kept falling, drowning the Morgan estate in a sea of sorrow, waiting for a single spark to break the darkness. In a tiny Brooklyn apartment, a dim light cast its glow over an old wooden table. Grace Carter, 32, sat in front of her laptop, eyes weary but resolute. On the screen, a job posting from the Morgan family. Nanny for 3 7-year-old boys. High pressure. Grace gave a bitter smile, fingers brushing across the keyboard. She had once been a preschool teacher, where every child's smile was her light. But 3 years ago, she walked away. Every time a child cried out for their parents, it dragged her back into the memory that haunted her, the fire that stole her family when she was 8. The foster system bounced Grace from home to home. She learned quickly that love always carried the risk of rejection. No prestigious degree, no powerful connections. Only one gift, the ability to see the pain in a child's eyes. Reading about the Morgans, the death of Emily, the infamous triplets, branded impossible, Grace's heart clenched. She saw herself in them, children screaming not out of hate, but to hide the terror of being abandoned. She whispered to herself, "They don't need a nanny. They need someone who understands their wounds." She began typing her application, each word feeling like a confession. "I won't promise to control your sons, Mr. Morgan. I only promise this. I will not leave them, no matter what happens." Her fingers trembled as she hit send. The old ghost, fear of rejection, stirred inside her. But she drew a deep breath, telling herself, "If I don't try, who will help those boys?" Grace stood, gazing out the window. Rain still fell, but her eyes now carried a spark of resolve. The news called the Morgan triplets demons. She didn't believe it. She recognized those angry eyes. She had seen them in the mirror every day as an orphaned girl. "I can't rewrite my past," Grace thought, "but I can give them a future." She grabbed her coat and stepped out of the apartment, ready to face the Morgan estate. For her, this wasn't just a job. It was a chance to heal. For them, and for herself. The Morgan estate kitchen was drowning in strawberry jam chaos. Ethan, Caleb, and Noah, the 7-year-old triplets, had turned it into a battlefield. Spoons of jam flew through the air, laughter colliding with screams. Ethan smeared jam across the wall, shouting, "No one ever stays." Caleb flung a spoonful, splattering Noah's shirt. The youngest burst into giggles, then froze, as if afraid to show his joy. Grace Carter stepped in, her gray dress still stained with feathers from the hall. The butler shook his head from the doorway. She won't last, but Grace didn't yell. She picked up a spoonful of jam and playfully attacked Caleb, smearing a red streak across his nose. "Well done, Team Strawberry Jam," she declared with a mischievous grin. The boys froze, their laughter cut short. Caleb wiped his nose, embarrassed. "What are you doing?" Grace sat at the table, eye level with them. "But you've never heard the story of when I smeared jam on my preschool classroom chalkboard, sent my teacher into panic." Noah blinked, curious. "Really? What happened next?" Grace laughed. "She kicked me outside, but all I wanted was to make everyone laugh, to forget their sadness." Ethan cut in, his voice sharp as ice. "You don't understand us. You'll leave like everyone else." Grace met his eyes, gentle, steady. "When I was 8, I lost my parents in a fire. I called and called, but no one answered. I know exactly how heavy that feels, Ethan." Silence fell over the kitchen. Only the steady tick of the clock remained. Caleb lowered his spoon. Noah clutched his teddy tighter, tears glistening. Ethan turned away, but his shoulders trembled. I won't promise to replace your mother, Grace continued, her voice warm but firm. I only promise to stay. Even if you turn me into a strawberry jam painting, Noah whispered softly. Tell us the rest of the jam story. Grace smiled and began to tell it. Slowly, children's laughter returned to the room. From the hallway, Alexander watched in silence. His heart ached at the sight of his son's first smile in 6 months. But he knew Ethan's wary eyes were still a mountain to climb. And Grace's journey had only just begun. Evening. The blue glow of the massive TV screen washed over tense faces in the Morgan Estates living room. The headline blared, "The Demon Triplets of the Morgan Family, Proof of an Irresponsible Father." On-screen, Ethan, Caleb, and Noah appeared in clips pieced together from former nanny's accounts. Shattered furniture, screaming voices, the flashing label, damaged, dangerous. Alexander, just back from a long day, slammed his papers onto the table. He dialed his lawyer. Shut this report down, now! They're destroying my sons. Caleb bit his lip, eyes red, voice trembling. Are we really broken? Noah clutched his teddy bear, whispering like a prayer. I don't want to be a monster. Ethan's fists tightened. His eyes burned with rage, but shimmered with tears, daring the world to come closer. Alexander tried to speak, but his throat locked. His hands shook. He had no idea how to comfort them. Grace Carter dropped to her knees, wrapping her arms around all 3 boys. Her voice was steady, warm, like a fire in a cold night. Listen to me, Ethan, Caleb, Noah. You are not broken. You are not dangerous. You are hurting. And hurt means you still love your mom. Still love this family. That can never be wrong. She looked straight into Ethan's eyes, unwavering. Don't let outsiders decide who you are. Alexander stood frozen, phone still in hand. Grace's words cut into the wound he had buried deep. For the first time, he saw his son's pain spoken out loud, not just through their destruction. From the corner, the butler muttered, "This report will ruin the Morgan name." But Grace didn't care. She rose, guiding the boys into the kitchen. She pulled out a box of cookies. Who wants to decorate some cookies to surprise your dad? He looks like he could use a little sweetness. Caleb hesitated, then picked up the icing tube. Noah gave a faint smile. Ethan stayed quiet, but he didn't turn away. Soft laughter drifted out, fragile but strong enough to push back some of the darkness. Alexander watched, his chest aching. The scandal on the news was only surface. A greater storm, the resentment of his children, was still waiting for him to face. The dim glow of the crystal chandelier fell over the Morgan Estates living room, the air heavy, like the silence before a storm. Alexander Morgan shot to his feet, face flushed red. He hurled the TV remote onto the table, the crack of impact echoing through the room. Enough, he roared, pointing at Grace Carter. You've humiliated my family in front of the entire world. You're gone, first thing tomorrow. Grace, still kneeling beside Ethan, Caleb, and Noah, lifted her head. Her gaze was calm, but sharp as a blade. Are you afraid of the public, Alexander? Or are you afraid of facing your own sons? Her words sliced straight through the armor he wore. Alexander collapsed into the chair, burying his face in his hands. His voice cracked apart. I forced Emily onto that flight. If it weren't for me, she'd still be here. I destroyed this family. The confession ignited like fire. Ethan shot to his feet, eyes blazing red. I knew it! You killed Mom! Caleb hurled a pillow against the wall, his voice broken. You chose work, not us. Noah clutched his teddy bear, sobbing. I hate you, Dad! I hate you! Their cries and accusations shattered the room like glass crashing to the floor. Alexander trembled, reaching out to them. But they stepped back, eyes filled with anger, fear, betrayal. Grace held steady. She didn't rush in. She knew, truth, no matter how painful, had to be spoken before healing could begin. Then gently, she drew all three boys into her arms. Her voice was low, warm, steady as a lifeline. Be angry. That's okay. You have the right to be angry. But don't let anger erase love. Your mother loved you, and your father, though he was wrong, loves you too. Ethan choked, tears streaming. Caleb and Noah buried themselves against her, their shoulders trembling. Grace lifted her gaze to Alexander, firm yet compassionate. Tell them what you just told me. They need to hear it from you. Alexander drew a shuddering breath, his voice hoarse. I was wrong, my sons. I can't lose you too. But Ethan's eyes stayed cold, a wall still standing. The room filled with sobs, raw, unrelenting. Grace knew the road to healing had only just begun. But the wounds were finally laid bare, waiting for a single spark of light to begin the cure. 3 days later, the heavy knock echoed through the doors of the Morgan estate. Mrs. Rodriguez, a CPS officer, stood there, clipboard in hand, eyes stern. We've received multiple complaints since the news report, she said, her voice cold. I need to assess whether these boys are safe here. Noah trembled, hiding behind Grace Carter. He whispered, Will they take us away, Grace? Grace gripped his shoulder, steady and firm. No one's taking you anywhere. We'll show them how strong this family really is. Alexander stood beside her, nodding, but his eyes betrayed his fear, his fists clenching as if trying to hold on to something slipping through his grasp. Mrs. Rodriguez observed everything, her pen scribbling nonstop. Lunch was served in the dining room, but the air was tight as wire. Ethan's gaze fixed on his mother's empty chair. Anger surged, a fire roaring to life. He grabbed a glass and hurled it at the window. Shards exploded across the floor, glittering in the light. Caleb clutched his head. Noah burst into sobs, clutching his teddy bear. Alexander went pale. Ethan, stop, he shouted. Mrs. Rodriguez's brows furrowed, her pen racing faster, her eyes cold as steel. This family has serious issues, she declared. I'm ordering mandatory family counseling. If there's no progress, we will consider separating the boys for their safety. Alexander trembled, words caught in his throat. Grace knelt, pulling Ethan close, her voice gentle yet firm. You're angry, I understand, but you need to speak it, not break it. Ethan shoved her away, his eyes blazing red with tears. I don't want to lose anyone else. Mrs. Rodriguez's gaze flickered toward Grace, softening slightly. Miss Carter, I'll give this family 7 days. I'll be back. She left, and the weight of her words lingered in the room. Alexander looked at his sons, his voice hoarse. I'll do anything to keep you. Grace clasped Noah and Caleb's hands, then turned to Alexander. We have 1 week to prove this family belongs together. Ethan turned away, his eyes still burning with resentment. The clock ticked loudly in the silence, counting down to a battle where love and healing would decide survival. A week later, sunlight streamed through the kitchen windows of the Morgan estate. Grace Carter stood between Ethan, Caleb, and Noah, all 4 dusted in flour. They were baking cookies for Alexander's office staff, the room alive with laughter. Caleb, stop eating all the sugar, Grace teased, raising the frosting tube like a weapon. Caleb burst out laughing. Noah sprinkled sugar like falling snow. And Ethan, still quiet, carefully arranged the cookies into the box. At the doorway, Mrs. Rodriguez from CPS watched. Her clipboard, for once, stayed still. Alexander walked in, sleeves rolled, awkwardly mixing dough. I'm terrible at this. Wildest, he muttered, flour covering the counter. Noah giggled. Caleb shouted, Dad makes the ugliest cookies! Laughter filled the kitchen, the first natural joy in 6 months. Mrs. Rodriguez's stern eyes softened. After lunch, Grace led Ethan into the garden. You're angry, I know, she said, sitting beside him. But anger is like fire. If you hold it inside, it burns you. Let it out. Ethan lowered his head, voice shaking. I'm scared of losing someone else. Mom's gone, and now CPS wants to take us away. Grace took his hand. Tell your father that, Ethan. He needs to hear it. In the living room, with Mrs. Rodriguez watching, Ethan took a deep breath. I'm sorry about the glass. I was just afraid of losing my family. Alexander dropped to his knees, tears clouding his eyes. I was wrong to let work blind me from you. From now on, I choose you, always. Caleb and Noah ran into his arms. Ethan hesitated, then stepped forward, allowing Alexander to pull him close. Mrs. Rodriguez wiped her eyes, her voice breaking. I see a family healing. These boys need love, not separation. She turned to Grace. Miss Carter, you're something special. That night, Grace and Alexander sat over coffee after the boys were asleep. You remind me of Emily, he said quietly, because you make the kids laugh. Grace smiled. I just want them to know they're worthy of love. Alexander took her hand, gratitude in his eyes. The Morgan home, once cold and hollow, now glowed with hope. The journey wasn't over, but the turning point had come. Healing had begun, binding them together with love and truth. 1 year later, the Morgan estate garden bloomed with roses, bathed in the golden light of sunset. The very roses Emily had once loved. Alexander Morgan, dressed in a sharp suit, stood beneath the rose arch beside Grace Carter. His eyes shone with joy and with longing. Grace, in a simple white dress, smiled as her hand tightened around his. Ethan, Caleb, and Noah, now 8 years old, wore little suits, standing as groomsmen. Their eyes sparkled with pride and just a hint of shyness. Guests applauded as Ethan stepped forward, microphone in hand. His voice trembled, but his words were steady. I promise not to hate Dad anymore. But Dad has to promise. He paused, eyes red, is to always remember Mom. Alexander dropped to his knees, pulling him into a tight embrace. His voice broke. I promise, Ethan, your mom will always live in our hearts. Caleb and Noah rushed in, wrapping their arms around them. Laughter mingled with tears, filling the garden. Grace knelt down, embracing all 3 boys. I can't replace your mom, but I promise to love you, always, no matter what. Noah whispered, You're our mom, Grace, now. Guests wiped their eyes. A soft violin melody drifted through the evening breeze, like Emily's blessing carried on the wind. Every weekend, the new family tended Emily's garden together. Grace taught the boys to plant roses. Alexander told stories of Emily, laughing with soil on her hands. One afternoon, Caleb asked, Grace, you'll stay forever, right? Grace grinned, smudging dirt on his nose. Forever, unless you throw jam at me again. The children's laughter rang out, filling the emptiness that once haunted the estate. Ethan still sometimes gazed at the horizon, missing his mother. But now he had learned to share that ache with Grace. Alexander, a devoted father at last, no longer let work overshadow his children. One quiet evening, he took Grace's hand and whispered, You didn't just save the boys, you saved me. Grace smiled softly. We saved each other, Alex. The Morgan estate, once a house of sorrow, now glowed with love and reconciliation. Like a garden blooming from barren soil, it stood as proof that love can heal even the deepest wounds. 5 years later, soft autumn sunlight spread gold across the quiet cemetery, where Emily Morgan's headstone bore the words, Forever in our hearts. Ethan, Caleb, and Noah, now 12, stood before their mother's grave, taller, older, yet still carrying traces of innocence. Ethan laid down a bouquet of white roses. His voice, deeper now but still trembling, whispered, Mom, we're okay. Grace helped us remember you in the most beautiful way. Caleb smiled. Noah held Grace's hand, his eyes shining. The boys had grown into kind young men. Ethan stood up for weaker kids at school. Though he still argued sometimes, he knew how to apologize, guided by Grace's advice. Caleb tutored immigrant children, carrying his mother's smile to others. Noah comforted friends when they were sad, always keeping his old teddy bear as a reminder of the past. They weren't perfect, but from old wounds, they had learned how to love. Alexander Morgan was no longer the cold CEO. He founded the Emily Morgan Foundation, helping families survive loss. Weekends were for soccer with his boys, laughing loud when Caleb intentionally missed a goal. Grace, now an author, had written From Pain to Strength, a book that inspired thousands. It told their journey, from a hollow mansion to a home filled with love. Before Emily's grave, Alexander knelt, whispering, "You would be proud of the boys? Proud of us?" Grace stood beside him, her voice steady. The strongest families aren't the perfect ones. They're the ones who learn how to love again after breaking. Ethan looked at her, his tone firm. "You're our family, Grace." Caleb and Noah nodded, wrapping their arms around her. Alexander took Grace's hand, eyes full of gratitude. "You gave us a second chance." Sunlight streamed through the trees, casting light on faces that had walked through grief and found healing. In their minds, the Morgan estate no longer stood as a place of sorrow, but as a home glowing with love. They left the cemetery, hand in hand, carrying both Emily's memory and the strength of reconciliation. Love, like the white roses in bloom, endured, outlasting loss, proving that even in the darkest night, light will always find its way.